Oh man, it's time to go home already. I don't want to go home. Look at this place. God, the weather is gorgeous. Beautiful. So that was the pool area. Here's where our room was. This is ridiculous. If I could do this every time we came here, this would be great. Hello, Kim.
Hi.
Happy to go home?
Yes and no.
It's a hard no for me.
Yeah.
So,
It was a beautiful vacation though. Can't
Sure was.
complain.
heck no, it was awesome. So, see you back in Wisconsin.
Bye.
Well, we made it back from Florida. Starting to grow my winter coat. God, it was absolutely beautiful down there. Unfortunately, we had to come home. But this video is going to be about some of the final things I did to the RV, kind of get it, prep for winter. Just a few things to button up out there, and to discuss what my plans are for this winter as to what I can do. I do have a few projects I can take care of during the winter time in prep for next spring. So let's get into it. One of the last things I did for this year was I went out there and I installed the radiator and intercooler and all that stuff just temporarily, and put the nose cone back on for the winter. So let's go take a look. So I put its ugly ass face back on for the winter. I got everything kind of installed in there. Just put on for the winter, give it some protection, and also just to prevent that nose cone thing from deforming. It's been kind of sitting, on the ground or on our patio, and I don't want that thing to take on some sort of weird shape to make it impossible to go on completely. I mean, it goes on hard enough. I'm gonna say that 1980s coach work, I'm gonna use that term loosely, fiberglass work was really, really crude. That whole nose cone was held on with pop rivets. It had huge pop rivets, so it was really kind of hard to put back on. It's just so crude. But it gives you a preview of what you're going to see coming down the road. I'll end up putting some stainless steel mesh in those two grill openings, but you get to see the Cummins logo, and you get to see some of the plumbing. you know, just a little clues to what's going on. But yeah, it's sitting on its the tires. It's down back on the ground for the winter. Let's take a look on the inside. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of put back together. It's just temporary until next year, until next spring. Got that hole covered with a piece of wood. Got the dash covers back on, and yeah, pretty happy with the progress I made this year. I'm actually, considering how much time I actually put into it, it's got more done than I thought I would when I, looking back. But yeah, it's looking good. So as I stated, one of the last big projects that I have is creating that, actually making the wiring harness for the transmission. One of the first things I'll have to do is mount the TCM, and I think I found a solution as to where I want to mount it. Let's take a look at that. Some of these winter projects, probably the biggest one is going to be the transmission controller wiring harness, and I've been kind of debating where I want to mount the TPS. As I stated before, I could mount that down here in the engine somewhere. There might be a little bit of room down there somewhere, but it is kind of exposed. If you're driving in the rain, you're going to have mist kicking up everywhere. So I'm definitely going to mount it inside here, but it was a matter of where. But I think I discovered a really good spot. This cover right here, that comes off, and it's essentially empty. This whole upper area, is pretty much devoid of anything. So if anything, I think I'm going to go ahead and make a bracket. There's some structural steel back there. I can just build a small rack to mount the TCM to. And depending on what I do with gauges, if there's any controllers or electronic components for the gauges, those can get mounted up there too. So yeah, I think that issue's been solved. So yeah. So this is that cover I was telling you about. I just have it lifted up, but you can see, maybe you can't see, I don't know, but it's like wide open. There's a ton of room in there for anything. And the original wiring is down there. That is some beautiful work. Going back to that statement I made about 80s coach work. Yeah. Attention to detail and fit and finish wasn't definitely on their list, that's for sure. I mean, right by the doghouse, you can see that piece of wood there. It's like not even level. It droops down to the passenger side. Yeah. 80s quality. What can I say? Regarding the wiring harness, there's not really a whole lot to say about it. I mean, once I get the TCM mounted underneath that little cove in there, it really would be a matter of just me running a few wires. I mean, there's only a few locations where that wiring has to stop. It goes from the TCM, there's 3 sensors, and then also where it plugs into the transmission. So if I can mount the TCM and just get a few wires stretched out to where it needs to be, then I can take out the whole thing and set up a template on my big board that I have out there and create a template, and then just route the wires from plug to plug. And that's all that's going to be to it. So that shouldn't be too bad. So another thing that I have to figure out, and I've been thinking about, well, ever since this started, is instrumentation. I do have options that I can take. There are options for me. The instrument cluster that's in there right now, that is not an option. But let's go take a quick look at that. So this is the original dash. Got the speedometer and fuel gauge, voltage, oil pressure, and water temperature. Pretty basic. That center gauge, the sole purpose of that was to light up a light that said brake. So when you put the parking brake on, it just lit up. And come to think of it, if you have brake issues, because when I pull this in here, that brake light was on. So yeah, these are, I'm not going to be able to reuse these. Mainly because the speedometer is mechanical. It was mechanically driven from the Turbo 400. It didn't have a factory tack. The previous owner had a beautiful vintage sun tack mounted up on top here. But I think I'm going to go a different route, and we can talk about those in a few seconds. The second option is I could use the bus cluster, and that is right here. This is the original bus cluster, and what's interesting about it is they got the speedometer and tachometer, and then the center one right here is a multi-purpose gauge, and I'm pretty sure it served the purpose of fuel level, oil pressure, coolant temperature, and maybe voltage. And how that was accessed was through this push button here that was mounted on the dash. And if they wanted to toggle that center multi-gauge through, to whatever function they wanted to show, they just pushed the button. And then after 20 seconds, it would go back to fuel gauge. There's also a digital display in here. It's kind of hard to see, but that displayed the air pressure of the two reservoirs that were on the bus. Remember, it was air brakes, so there was two lines that monitored the pressure of the air pressure levels, and then also the odometer was there. But I could use this, and it's a weird shape right now, but this is simple enough to deconstruct where the plastic cover could come off, and then this black surround could come off, maybe, but then also an option to integrate this would be to just 3D print something where it would go into the dash and RV, because right now this isn't really in an optimal angle. It's kind of tipped back the way it is, and these gauges would be laid way back, and it would look kind of goofy, but yeah, so I could reuse that. The advantage of reusing that is I know they work with that engine. All the sensors, the proper sensors that gauge used are on the engine right now, and I know where they all are. I still have the wiring harness from the bus. I labeled all those connectors of what hooked up to what. So let's take a quick look at that. I have that up in the garage. let's take a peek at that. So here's the wiring harness out of the bus. I mean, I saved it all. I pretty much labeled, what plug went to what sensor. Not all of them are going to get reused. Depends on the route I take. But that's the connector for the bus gauge. The bus's gauge cluster. I saved this relay block. Who knows? Maybe I can reuse that. But yeah, that's got to get installed back on the engine if I use the bus cluster. So reusing the bus gauges is one of 3 options that I have. So I have that all laid out. You can see what I had to work with the bus instrumentation. Finding information for that cluster is damn near impossible. Luckily enough, I did photocopy some documentation that Lamers had of that bus, and they had like the wiring diagram, which I don't think is 100% accurate, but they also had some information about this gauge cluster, which was actually a retrofit into that bus, but they have the pinout diagram of all the sensors. And if I am going to integrate this, obviously the speedometer and the tachometer, well, I take that back. The tachometer, it gets its signal off of the alternator. From the wiring diagram I saw, I'm pretty sure of that. The speedometer, that got its signal possibly from the AT545, but that was a mechanical transmission, so I'm not 100% sure where a signal came from for the speedometer. So my option to integrate this dash using what I got is relatively simple. So Jason from transmissiontuner.com has an output for vehicle speed. It's the VSS, the vehicle speed sensor. And he's giving me a pulse train for the speedometer. I'm thinking it's pulses per mile. I don't know how many pulses per mile this gauge is set up for. I know that these can be programmed. I did find that out on the internet. These can be programmed, but the programming software is impossible to find. So I would have to figure out how to integrate that signal from the transmission, how I would integrate that signal into this gauge. And one thing I could use is it's an electronic box that would feed the pulses in to this electronic box, and then you can scale how many pulses come out. So I would have to do some creative math, maybe not creative, but get the two talking together, getting the speedometer to work, and then essentially calibrating it by going down the highway, comparing my GPS speed to what's displaying on this speedometer, and then scale it. I'd be able to punch that number into that gizmo, the interpolator. I don't know what you call it, but it's a little electronic box. And that's how I could get this cluster to work. So, yeah, we'll just leave it there. That's how I could get that one to work. So the second option I've been thinking about, and it really appeals to me because it's cool, is a touchscreen dash. There's a company called The One Gauge, and you can visit their website at theonegauge.com, and it's really cool. Essentially, it's a hub. They call it a hub, which is a central electronics box, and it has all sorts of terminals on it. And that has a capability of interfacing to up to 2 touch screens. And They have an option for a 10.1-inch touchscreen, which would actually be perfect for the layout in that vehicle. And I could do a second screen, for different gauges if I want gauges over here. The beauty of that is I can design my own screen if I want. They have several to choose from, different screens, different gauge layouts, like from ultra modern to retro looking or old fashioned gauges, old analog style. It is so cool. But anyways, yeah, it's cool. The downfall is I'll probably need all new sensors because they require certain sensors. It won't be too difficult, and they're readily available, and they're all NPT threads. So I just remove the sensors that are on there and replace them with what they require. Also, the beauty of doing this touchscreen is that I can add gauges that I didn't have before. Like, we looked at that screen and it was pretty basic. TAC and speedometer and the 4 other things that, were just absolutely basic. But I want to monitor other things like exhaust gas temperature, boost pressure, trans temperature, maybe even fuel pressure. I don't know. Maybe not 100% necessary, but it sure would be handy to have that information available. So that's the beauty of this. And I could choose any gauge that I want. And later down the line, if I want to add a gauge, I don't know, manifold temperature, anything that can be added on simply by putting a sensor in and adding the wires, adjusting the display, and now I got another gauge. And that was also another thing I looked at. Or stepping back, but getting an all analog gauges, individual gauges, the TAC and the speedo and all these individual gauges. But there's not a whole lot of real estate on that dash to put these. And it gets pretty messy with all the wiring, and I just opted to maybe go this route. After it's all said and done, the 1 gauge, I'm not going to say it's cheap, but if I tally up the cost of every individual gauge that I wanted, it would be way more than this 1 gauge option. So I'm looking into that. It's really cool. It geeks me up. So that's the second option. The third option, I just kind of stumbled across this just recently, and this one's kind of got me excited. And it's been done before. You go on YouTube and you can find tons of videos, but people make their own dashes. And how do they do that? Well, they're using Arduino. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's been around for 8-10 years maybe. But Arduino is kind of like this geeky cult. I'm not gonna say it's a cult, but it's like people who experiment with electronics. And Arduino is a microprocessor. There are different options. There's one called Raspberry Pi, but that probably is a little bit too advanced for what I need. A microprocessor or a microcontroller would be just fine. I don't need anything else. It's fast enough. It has the horsepower as far as computing horsepower, has just enough for that. And you can do some really cool things with it. So This is the brain of the operation, and this comes in different configurations. This one's called the Uno, and it's probably the most popular selling. And it has inputs and outputs, analog, pulse width modulation, digital outputs, and you can interface it with touch screens. So there are plenty of touchscreen manufacturers out there. Of course, everyone's from China, but the one that actually One Gauge uses is a manufacturer called NextGen or Nextion. I'm not exactly sure, but they have a variety of touchscreens, capacitive touch, resistive touch, different sizes. Cheap. I mean, the screens aren't exactly cheap. Like the 10.1 inch is $125, but still, it's not horrible. And as far as the Arduinos go, something like this you can get for under $25. And what I did was I got a starter kit, and they send all this stuff along for essentially projects to kind of get you boned up on Arduino and what its capabilities are. But I mean, they give you breadboards and touch pads, a bunch of resistors, distance sensors. Let's see, RFID. It's an RFID like tag. I have this on my Yamaha. It's my key for my Yamaha. It's just an RFID tag. Water sensors, if it comes in contact with water, or actually water level sensors. IR remotes. So it's really cool, and it's going to keep me busy over the winter time because I love this stuff. And so, like I said, they make different styles of these. This one has limited I/O. Not a whole lot of inputs and outputs. I mean, it's enough, but not a whole lot. And it's also all this is open source. So a lot of the projects, a lot of the people who do this, they share their code. There's no secrets with it. It's open source. And after digging into One Gauge, it turns out that their system is Arduino based. It's based off the Arduino Mega, which is just a little bit bigger than this, and it has a lot more inputs and outputs. And I can see why they use that platform because there's a lot of inputs and outputs from a vehicle for sensors and whatnot, and they're interfacing it with the NextGen touchscreen. So why couldn't I do it? So I'm just gonna noodle around with this winter and see if I can't come up with a plan. I mean, I only have to figure it out for my code, figure out my code for just one vehicle. One Gauge, they had to make this thing configurable for pretty much anything. You can put this in anything. Cars, trucks, boats. You can put one on your lawnmower if you want. You can put one in a piece of shit RV. But they have to have that configurable. You tell them what you're doing, they configure it, and they send it out. Their stuff isn't open source, and I don't blame them because there's a lot of work that went into it. But I could figure this stuff out for what I got. I could maybe even use the sensors that I got. If I could get information and find out what the resistance values are at certain temperatures, I could maybe figure it out. But yeah, I'm gonna take a shot at it. I got a small screen, a NextGen touch screen coming. It's a 5-inch, and besides the gauges, I am planning on doing Arduino projects that don't relate to the gauges. I might do an Arduino project for the air system. There is going to be compressed air in the system, on the RV. It does have airbags, So through a touch screen and a few pressure switches and valves, I could actually automate changing the air pressures in the airbags front and back. If it's riding too stiff, push the touch screen and release some air. It's totally tunable, customizable, on the fly. I might also do something for headlight control and wiper control. Right now there's no delay wipers. I could do a small project using relays to turn headlights on, wipers on, high, delay, all that. So that's kind of cool. Put a small touchscreen in there for that. Also, a third project would be water levels. There's a water tank on board. There's a gray water tank and a black water tank. So could monitor water levels in the tanks. Sorry about that. My camera disconnected. Anyways, turn on the water pump. So there's several little projects that I really want to do and probably will do. That covers that. So I got a few things to keep me busy over the winter. I'm actually excited about starting this Arduino stuff because kind of geeky that way. But yeah, so that's that. I'm here with my wife, Kimberly, the queen bee.
Hello.
So, get this on the record right away. If she wasn't on board, there's no way this project would be happening. There's no way.
That's true.
I mean, I would have never even thought of doing something like this at all, ever. But it's the only reason it's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the original thought process was to get this for a traveling
Okay, hang on a second.
store.
Right? Hang on a second.
Oh, okay.
So let's before we go there, let's just back up. So here's my first question. This
Okay.
is my first question.
All right.
So there was that day that I came home
Yes.
and I said, "Hey Kim, you want an RV?" And you may have asked, "What do you mean?" And I explained. What did you think? What were your initial thoughts?
Well, I think I may have asked you how much does it cost or whatever, and you said no, it's free. I'm like, seriously, it's free. I'm like, what kind of condition is it in?
And that's, I think, when we went and
Looked at it.
So then we went and looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
Then what did you think? I mean, because we told them we were gonna, or no, we went and looked at it and we told them we're gonna take it.
Right. So one of the thoughts were to revamp it for a traveling, so that I could sell my products.
She sells soap, so it was gonna be a mobile
store.
soap store where she could go to the markets, like in Green Bay, and just pull up and sell soap. But that kind of...
Then we looked at it and we kind of thought, oh, it's a little bit too big for that.
Yeah.
We're like, it's too big.
Yeah.
But then the thought was, well, we could remodel it and use it for our own purposes, recreational purposes.
But then after we got it home, I discovered that the engine was tired and needed to be rebuilt. I mean, at that point, what did you think then?
Well,
I mean, I thought the project was over. Because, I mean, fix it or just scrap it. I mean, because... Yeah, I thought the project was over.
But then you were doing some investigating about putting other engines in it or redoing this and doing that. I'm like, well, okay, that sounds doable.
Yeah, because the options were rebuild it or do something with it. And I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw an ad for a bus, or it was originally engines for sale at Lamers in Green Bay, but then he pointed out that there was a whole bus for sale, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Well, yeah. And we weren't buying the bus just for the engine, because then you were like, well, I can harvest all the parts out that
Yeah.
you're going to need.
It was
starting to make sense.
it was the way to go.
You know, and we kind of put a limit, a ceiling on what we were going to spend. We didn't want to spend as much as buying a new one or a used one. That's basically...
No, because I joked about it before. I told you before I don't like camping. But, I mean, if you can pull into a site and you're set up,
Yeah,
yeah.
with minimal setup.
Okay, so the next question is when I take on these projects, my thought process, what's your opinion of my thought process?
Well, it's like...
Yeah,
your thought process never stops.
yeah.
And
I
you
don't
investigate things 110%.
Right. It's not like I'm doing things. It's not
Halfway.
like no. It's not like I do a million projects. I only really it's the smoker, which you told me I was crazy when I did the fridge conversion to a smoker.
Obsesses about things, yeah.
And 8 years later, is it 9 years later? The thing still works great, and we love barbecue. I mean, it works great. And then the motorcycle was another one. Research the hell out of that and turn that into something that you do not see every day.
Right.
It's completely done. So now, with the RV, this is definitely my biggest project. I mean, here we are 2 years in, and you know.
Well, and I know that when you do something, you're going to do it right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
where the obsession.
It's not like I would get into it and say, "Oh boy, what's going to happen?" It's
Right. I mean, ideally, you should be able to drive it. There's going to
Yeah.
be nothing wonky about it.
When I'm gonna.
It's you'll be able to drive it. So yeah. And the last question: what are you looking to get out of it? I mean, I know what I know.
Memories. I want to go wherever we want to go and discover areas of the United States that we've never been in. This is kind of a vehicle, which it is, but it's a vehicle in a way that we can do it.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to just wandering. I mean, I like just wandering and getting lost. There's so many places
To go on
in Wisconsin, and you know, once I start driving this thing and gaining confidence in it, yeah, I got a list of places I want to go. She's seen it, and I'm excited.
Yeah.
And who knows? I mean, obviously this isn't, you know, a dream camper. It's
No.
by far
But
not
it's cool. It's going to be cool.
Right, it's cool, and maybe it's a starting point.
Right.
And if we sell it for something maybe a little bit more modern, yeah, maybe that's what it leads to. I don't know, but I don't know if any of our kids would let us sell it. There's no way. There's no way they would let us sell it.
Probably not.
I just might end up giving it to one of them if that's the case. But yeah, so I'm excited.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I'm like, when I'm at the store and I hear all these people come in and they're like, oh, we're from Colorado, we're from all over the United States, and they say, yeah, we take a month or two and we just drive around the United States and go where, you know, we just drive and see where we end up. And I'm thinking that seems pretty cool. So
Yeah.
that's,
To have no destination,
yeah, just go.
just go. Where you want to sleep that night is the nearest Walmart away.
or which direction you want to go in.
Exactly.
Well, we only have 3 directions really, because we got the lake on one side of us. But yeah,
Yeah, in
I'm
Canada to the
excited.
north. So okay, well, thanks, Kim.
Well, thank you, Scott.
Yep. So stick around till next spring. If anything pops up during winter, I'll post it. But otherwise, thanks for watching and stay tuned.
And I can't wait for you to see what I'm going to do with the inside of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's the part you'll be directly involved in.
Absolutely.
You'll pick out the colors and I'll do the legwork.
Yeah, pretty much.
We'll see. So, thanks for watching.
All right, thanks. Bye.